Advent is a time of waiting and patience. When they finished building the front of the school about a month ago, they decided it was the perfect time to plant grass. And in my mind, November doesn't seem like the perfect time to plant grass, but evidently it is. The fall is the perfect time, so they spray down all this grass. And they said if it gets warm enough, it might even grow now. Well, we know that's not happening at the moment. So we have to be patient, and we have to wait, and maybe in the spring we'll see grass. And that's what Advent's about. And you know, in our lives, just as grass seeds are planted, how we live our lives each day is reflected when we realize that every day we plant seeds. We plant seeds in how we respond to things. We plant seeds as to how we speak. We plant seeds as to how we deal with situations that are easy and situations that are difficult. The thing we have to ask ourselves is, what kind of seeds am I planting? As I go through my day, are the seeds that I'm planting building people up, or the seeds I'm planting doing something that isn't so good? Because each day we set examples by simply how we live our lives. And what about in our conversations with one another? How we speak to one another, how we deal with people who agree with us, and how we deal with people who don't necessarily agree with us. We plant seeds. How we look at somebody who has a different point of view than us. How we react. You know, we're all very good at talking. We're not as good at listening. And to take time to actually listen to somebody else before we're ready to speak again. To take time to listen to somebody who might have a different point of view. To be open. And then it's not just with other human beings. It's with God as well. Sometimes we can be very good at talking to God, but not as good at listening to God. Because God might be presenting us with a different point of view. God might be asking us to look at things in a different way. And we might not be open to that. In the first reading we heard, a shoot shall sprout from the stump of Jesse. The Jews were waiting for the coming of the Messiah, and they still are. And we believe that Jesus is that Messiah. And he has come into our lives. But God doesn't always work at the speed we would like him to work. You know, when we plant seeds by how we live our lives, we may never see the results. Or we might see these results, but it takes time. When we speak to one another, when we speak to somebody who might not agree, we may not see anything change. But who knows? When we choose to listen to God speaking to us, it might not happen immediately that we're able to follow what he's asking. But Advent is a time of patience and waiting, recognizing things aren't going to necessarily happen immediately. Not by appearance shall he judge. Aren't we lucky that none of us judge each other by appearances? But just in case, every now and then, maybe that does happen, we can ask God for the grace to be a little more open. You imagine what the world would be like if we were a little more open to those who were different than us. A little more open to somebody who has a different point of view. Goes on, then the wolf shall be the guest of the lamb, the cow and the bear shall be neighbors. The baby shall play by the cobra's den. Wouldn't that be wonderful? if somehow we could still exist together when we don't necessarily agree with each other. My friends, if we truly allow the Lord Jesus Christ to be a part of everything we are and everything we do, we truly allow God to be a part of every discussion, every conversation we have. We truly allow God to be a part of everything that comes out of our mouths. I suspect all of us would live slightly different. The second reading we heard, that you might have hope. Hope. That's what Advent's about. And you know, we can plant seeds of hope in our conversations, in our dealings with others, or we can plant seeds where there's no hope. Then he goes on to say, may God of endurance and encouragement grant you to think in harmony with one another. Wouldn't that be great? To think in harmony with one another. It doesn't mean we agree all the time. But to think in harmony means we're willing to coexist with each other. A voice of one crying out in the desert, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight his paths. Are the seeds we're planting each day preparing the way of the Lord? What if the rest of the day we just kind of thought that? Every day, every time I speak, every time I act, I'm planting seeds. And what do I want those seeds to produce? Doesn't seem like the right time to plant grass, but evidently it is the right time to plant grass, and you have to be patient and just wait, and eventually it grows. In our lives, we plant seeds. Sometimes things happen immediately, and oftentimes they don't. We simply ask God in this Advent season to give us the grace to be people of hope, to give us the grace to plant seeds that build others up, to recognize that we're not always going to agree with each other, but we can have conversations, to recognize somebody else might have a different point of view, but that's okay. If we allow God to guide us, and that's the key. If we allow God to guide everything we are, everything we do, everything we say, then he'll help us to plant the seeds that he wants us to plant.